jetzt, ja?
Jetzt ist der Hand, aber jetzt noch eins.
Das ist gut?
Nein.
Nehmen Sie es auf. Nehmen Sie es auf, okay. Ja, so, guten Abend, danke fürs Kommen. Heute der dritte, vierte SME Round Table Abendevent. Und wollte nur kurz eine kurze Einleitung machen heute, was überhaupt der SME Round Table Runners geht. Es geht daran, wir sind alles über kleine oder mittelständische Unternehmen. Entweder haben wir Kunden oder Opportunitäten haben, wo wir dann eine Dienstleistung halt einbringen möchten und haben Bedürfnis vielleicht für Ressourcen. Oder wir haben Ressourcen, die bei uns eingestellt sind, die wir dann für ein Projekt suchen. Also geht in beide Richtungen. Dass wir uns auf einer Vertrauensbasis austauschen unter uns. Ich habe dort bei meinem Kunde sehe ich Bedürfnisse, ich kann die Bedürfnisse abdecken mit einem Consultant. Aber wir haben jemanden, der könnte passen und so kommen zu 1:1 Beziehungen zustande. ADP unterstützt es mit diesen Plattformen, auch technisch mit einer Online-Plattform, das wir in der Einladung verlinken. Und wir haben auch jede 2 Wochen einen Call, das ist ziemlich wesentlich, wo wir dann diesen Austausch dann durchführen. So, das ist kürzer der SME-Idee vom ADP insgesamt. Und ich habe einen Slide, ich denke, wir schicken nachher die Slides und vielleicht einen Link zu dem Video, das gerade aufgenommen wird, nachher herum. Ich lese es nicht durch, aber wir haben ein paar Events bisher gehabt. Circa einmal im Quartal. Wir haben das letzte Quartal ausgesetzt und davor war auch Weihnachten, so haben wir jetzt wieder so grob einmal im Quartal und das wir uns auch vis-à-vis auch sehen, dass wir wissen, wer das am Telefon ist. Also wir haben uns öfters ausgetauscht am Telefon, aber nie gesehen, zum Beispiel. Und dann baut man nach und nach das Vertrauen auf. So, ich habe jetzt genug gesagt. Jetzt haben wir unser Guest Speaker, Stefan Mettig. Ich lasse der Feld und Mikrofon habe ich total vergessen.
Okay, und dann müssen wir das anstellen, oder?
Ja, dann hat es wahrscheinlich. Stefan wird was zur Disruption sagen für uns. Und bevor ich was Falsches über Disruption sage, dann übergebe ich das Mikrofon, das auf dem Tisch lag. Für die, die es dann nachher sehen, man hört, dass es warm ist, wegen Eis. Und
excellent. Okay.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. So, I'm going to speak in English because it's going for the world and it's going for you especially. Hey, it's not only outside hot, but it's also disruption is a hot topic. And the point is, what is disruption actually? Everybody speaks about disruption, and let me, as an entrance, give you a little nice example about home. So I have a 20-year-old daughter. My fiancé and I, Friday Eve, just imagine me Friday Eve and my fiancé being in the living room, watching TV after a hard week of work, watching a movie and like this. My mobile just close to me, and then all of a sudden there's an SMS. And I like, oh my God, a client is like SMSing me, something is going wrong, or I don't know. Can you imagine what this SMS is about? Who sent it and what's the content? Any idea? I'll tell you. It's my daughter 5 meters away in her room and is texting me a message and saying, is there still some milk in the fridge? Isn't that funny? But this is disruption, because it changes totally the paradigm where we're in. And there are 2 ways now, and then I will go into the disruption as well. We have 2 ways. One way could be me as a father freaking out, right? Totally freaking out and saying, what the hell? Can't you just walk over? No. The other option is send her a message back and tell her, and that's what I did, and tell her, why don't you go to the fridge, check it out, and if there is some milk missing, order it via Le Shop or any digital platform. So do you see, it's a different mode of thinking, and it's a different mode of behavior we are going into. So basically, shortly, to me, who I am in various boards a member, as well as for ADP, and this is an honor for me. I think that ADP in Switzerland and hopefully in Europe has the opportunity to grow and has the potential as well, and I see that. Since I knew most of the people, I know them. Then on the second thing, I'm an investor and advisor in a couple of startups. Startups like HR technology or medcare, medical startups. And I'm researching at a business school in the area of strategic innovation. So innovation is a totally different story, yeah? So we don't have to confuse disruption with, let's say, incremental, radical, technological innovation and so on. But disruption really is a principle. It's not just a buzzword, you know, that everybody talks about it. It's disrupting me. Okay. I can't see it. Okay, wait a minute. So disruption, what is it actually? It's a small firm with capable human resources that are able to bring, as a garage, for example, a small group of people that can bring down a giant. And what does this mean? I mean, yeah, disruption, bringing down a garage. So what is very important is to distinguish in disruption between two types of disruption. One is the new market disruption. And what it means is that if you have, for example, and this is a beautiful illustration, in the 70s and in the 80s you had these huge stationary printers in the companies where you could print, where you could copy, but who was neglected? Who was forgotten? Any idea? Of course, the consumer at home. So Canon and all these people, they thought about and they identified, hey, this is a new market, we can disrupt it. And they invented the inkjet printer, and they came into the market into this forgotten consumer target. So what it actually means, you have lower performance in traditional attributes, which is logical compared to the stationary printer, but improved in performance for the consumers that they need. And what's also important is the stationary printer, of course, is more expensive, and so the consumer lacked the money to buy this. So with this small inkjet printer, they were able to buy this and print and copy at home. So this is a new market disruption. And you can have that in various ways. And the business model, of course, is you make money at a lower price per unit sold, so you can reach the consumer. So that is new market disruption. But there's another one. And the other one is the low-end disruption. It does not have anything to do with new market. It's a market that exists, but the point is, and I give you again an example, is if you recall the car industry in the 80s in America, they sold cars at a very high price with a reasonable functionality. And what happened then in the 80s and 90s is that the Japanese, through modularity, and we will come afterwards in a couple of slides later, what is modularity? Through modularity they were able to actually provide a car at a much lower price, and what they did is actually they came from the bottom into the market. So consumers that wanted to have a car could afford it, but at a very high price, and all of a sudden were able to buy a car at a lower price with more functionality and attributes that were in performance. So just good enough cars at the beginning at a lower price, and the business model here is that you enter on the bottom, you conquer the market, then you go for the next level until you have the margin, you go to the next level, to the mid-level, for example, mid-sized cars with air conditioning already that is missing in this room. And then, of course, as we know, the Japanese have also entered the luxury cars industry. So that's totally different, right? You're coming from the bottom with a low-end disruption in an existing market of cars, and on the other hand, in the new market disruption, there is no market, and you have consumers waiting for a product to be offered to you. So this is very important to distinguish. I mentioned modularity. Many of the incumbents, or so to speak, established companies and firms at the moment, or even in the past, were forward integrated and interdependent. And what I mean by this is that the architecture was so intertwined, or is intertwined, that if you want to change one particular thing, you have to change it everywhere. So if you look at an example of a bank, Credit Suisse, UBS, or whatever, for them, for the established banks, it's very difficult to actually, when they disrupted, to answer to the disruption, because they cannot change their infrastructure. And as a concrete example, and this is very important, I've learned this as well, is deposits and loans will never be outsourced, because this is the core of a bank. This is it's like transactioning or being a transmitter between two parties. Because a bank, through its deposits, they have loads of deposits, have a lot of capital, and they can give the loans at a very reasonable price to the consumers. So they're actually intermediaries, and this intermediary status will remain. But on the other hand, you know, and we see that with the fintechs and all this, other functionalities can be outsourced or can be given away. And one example is payments or is operation. So you could actually have a core focus on deposit and loans, and then acquire from fintechs payments and operation solutions. And the important thing about this is, when you move from interdependence to modularity, is that in a saturation of the consumers, a provider of an established company that is actually focusing on feasibility and functionality, because the product is not good enough anymore, you have to hurry up every day and make it more feasible and more functional for the consumer, then of course, if you want to face this disruption, you need to be fast, flexible, and you need to be responsive. And with, as I said at the beginning, with this intertwined, interdependent and forward integrated architecture as a business model, this is not possible. So this is the explanation of the difference between interdependence and modularity. Let me just show you something. Do you know what this is? And how it fits into disruption? Do you have any idea? It means that if you want to become modular, you need standardized interfaces. Clear-cut standardized interfaces. And if you recall, let's say 20 years ago, Thomas, maybe you also, and Richard, you remember, 20 years ago, how many different cables did we have to connect, right? No standardization in components. Yes, and that's the key. So the graph on the left-hand side shows you a forward integrated architecture. And all of the different dots are particular subunits within this architecture. So if you want to change one of these little balls, you have to change maybe one, more, or all of them. And the components are unique. The bubbles are, of course, on components. They have no standardized interfaces, and I know a lot of companies are having trouble with this, with developing just for a huge strategy and a business model. I'll give you afterwards a nice example from a bank. They have to even pay much more to develop a standardized interface compared to a product or a product portfolio they want to develop. Again, they optimize on function and reliability, feasibility. It's in-house, slow adoption, of course, because you have to change everything. But it creates new industries. It's not a bad thing. It creates industries. And give me please forgive me, but I would like to give you an example, a beautiful example. It was 2015-16. I was called in one of the two large Swiss globally operating banks, and they asked me, it was retailing, yes, and they said, hey, we have a problem, we are losing client base. And I said, okay, good, I'm coming in, and I looked at it, I looked at the market research, I looked at their reports, and I said, okay, is that actually bundles? That basically what they're selling is bundles, right? You have an account, you have a Eurocheck card, you have a credit card, and you have some non-core banking services. So do I want that? No. I would like to have freedom. I want to have modularity. I do not want to buy, let's say, an insurance for the entire year. I want to buy an insurance, let's say, for 2 weeks. Because I'm going, and I'm not going, but I would love to go to, let's say, Bangkok, right? And I would like to have an insurance for 2 weeks, which is a non-core offering. So we did that. I made inductively, I developed from nothing. I made interviews with a couple of people on the street, with youngsters, with my daughter as well again. She's a little guinea pig, so I use her. And we came up inductively with a model saying that the market wants modularity, not only in terms of architecture, but in terms of a product portfolio. That means, on one hand, yes, core banking services and products, but on the other hand, non-core banking products and services. So we developed that, and I'm coming to it, and we had that ready. It was web-based, it was ready for the CEO. We showed it on handhelds. It was you could present it on mobile device, on any device. And then I said to my project sponsor, "Hey, wait a minute. Did we not forget something?" And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "We need to speak to infrastructure people." So we went to the infrastructure guy and we asked him, "Is this realizable?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Why?" "Because we don't have any interface." And you know, the interface would have costed so much, and they have not realized yet that. So two things, interface is important, and the forward integration and interdependence, that is very difficult. And on the other hand, on the right hand side, you have the modular architecture with standardized components, and components can be, let's say, services, it can be operations, it can be products, it can be fintechs providing any devices. But what is very important is these interfaces that have to be standardized and cleared. And it has to be optimized for price and speed, because you need to exchange the components. You cannot just hop on a component, let's say for 10 years, it doesn't work, because we have to be flexible, responsive and fast. Much outsourced, of course, it makes sense, because the specialist, and this is the so-called experience of why a firm actually exists, is it can produce a product like a pencil. I mean, just assume that everybody of us would produce their own pencils at home. It's too expensive, too time consuming. So that's the reason why a bunch of people get together and they produce a pencil that is less costly than the market offers, right? What do you think? You can move from the right to the left? But now I would like to have an answer, come on. It's hot in here, I know, but it's a hot topic. Do you think you can move from the right to the left? Mark?
Not really feasible.
Not really feasible. Because of this forward integration, right, and interdependence. Just imagine this huge infrastructure. How do you want to replace one component with the others? Doesn't work. Does not work. You know, so many companies have tried it. Doesn't work. The center is not only the difference between new market and low-end disruption, and interdependence and forward integrated architecture versus modular architecture. The core of the whole thing is the job to be done. And I give you again an example is in America, a fast food chain actually tried to understand why, for the bloody sake, Americans or some commuters bought milkshakes in the morning. Why did they buy milkshakes? So they interviewed the people, and all of them responded one thing: we are commuting by car, and that's why we buy milkshakes. Do you have any idea why, in addition, and we've seen it, functionality, and why in addition do they buy milkshakes? It's because you have a cup holder in the car, you can put the milkshake in the cup holder, very convenient. And on the other hand, you do not starve until 12 o'clock, because it saturates you enough until 12 o'clock. And you have a straw, and it's very convenient. So it's actually causality that matters now in a disruption. I'm talking about disruption, and not the correlation of a gender, of a particular behavior in terms of age, but it's rather on a behavior of a specific task to be done. And the job to be done is nothing else as to solve a problem that someone is facing. So with the job to be done, you solve a problem someone is facing. So in this case, it's the milkshake. And of course it has also emotional feelings in it, but the core is actually the functionality. And the causality matters over the correlation. This is new, huh? Okay, now we know we're either in a new market disruption or we're in a low-end market disruption. We know interdependence and forward integration does not work in order to be responsive, fast and flexible. And we also know there is a job to be done, but which strategy to choose now? Difficult, because maybe another question, and from a lot of empirical case studies over since the end of the 90s, it was observed that yes, when a market is disrupted and an incumbent established company has to confront the disruption, either is a new market or low-end disruption, you need to act. So as we know, we cannot go from interdependent to modularity. We need to found a new company, a laboratory, a startup, or whatever. Now the question is, and I have again an example from my experience in my life, the first startup that I actually done, we completely failed. And you know why? We went to Berlin, nice place. We got 2.5 million of money, and what happened is we were observed, controlled the entire time, like on a 4-weekly basis of how we are advancing. With a startup, with a new idea, with a new technology that we wanted to invent and bring to the market. So it didn't work. So that means actually, and I will, in the next slide, we will also see what it means in terms of money. At the beginning, you should start, or such a new adventure or enterprise should start with an emergent strategy where you have the time and the possibility and the opportunity to experiment and to learn from the lessons learned in order to fine-tune where you want to go. And once the strategy is clear, once the job to be done is clear, you can jump, or one startup can jump into a deliberate strategy where you can ask for a big venture capital or for an investor capital or whatever. That's very important to understand, and we failed. And then we switched with a startup, and now we're successful. We had to redo everything. We went with small portions, and we were so experimentation and lessons learned through emergent strategy going into a deliberate strategy is very important to understand. It might be very simple, but whoever has done a startup knows exactly what it means. It's not built from one day to the other, like Rome. So, and what's also important is the money, as I mentioned. And when a company or an industry is faced with disruption, they have to understand their business model and where they want to go. And they have to look at the value chain if they want to provide a component. They cannot, as I said, they cannot provide the entire thing, but be specialized on components. And that's exactly where they have to find the money or skate for the money that brings them the most value in one particular component. And we see that with the fintechs. Some do payments, some do well, some do not well, some are in, some are phasing out, some are successful. Same with products and services. But it needs to skate for the money that gives you the most value stack. And as I mentioned before, the good and the bad money is also very important, because you need to go at the beginning for small portions. And I'm actually founding a new company in the medtech industry. It's in diagnostics. And we had the opportunity to go with venture capitalists or with large investments. But I said to the owner of the business, let's go for a private capital in small portions, let's say of 50 to 100,000, and develop it further in order to experiment and to have the lessons learned. So this is called the good money and the bad money. And then of course this fulfills the profit formula, which is the resources in general, human resources, financial, the processes and the structure. And how you allocate and control those processes. Yeah, a short recap. I don't want to make it too long, but we know now the disruption is taking place maybe in a particular industry. We can see it, and we can, let's say, assume it's happening in the banking industry. It happened in the car industry. It might happen also in the consulting industry. And what's important is to understand, is it a new market? But what can I do? Can I enter as a new market disruption into a market that is consumers are not served? Or should I go low end with a chatbot, for example? Chatbot is actually a good chatbot is a good example for banking industry, because in investment and wealth management, one has to pay a particular percentage of a fee if you want to invest. And me as a let's say mid-class, it's difficult. I don't have millions. Okay, I have a couple of millions, but not billions. This was a joke. But anyhow, those consumers are not, they're missed. And now imagine you have a chatbot, you can, with an algorithm behind it, and you can ask simple questions about, what should I do with my money? Should I, and again, a very nice example, and I'm gonna go around a circle, is there is evidence that there is no recipe of making money in whatever way in the financial market. And what it means is that one wise way to make money is to invest in small portions in various different stocks. So that means you have, let's say, a bundle of, you put in 10,000 one stock, you put 10,000 in 2008, you would have put into bitcoins, of course, 10,000, and we would not sit here, we would be on a yacht somewhere in the Caribbean, and so on. So the disruption, you know the disruption, you know where you have to go, and you know that your architecture doesn't work because you're interdependent, so you have to found a new company. Now you have the new company, and you have to think about, with my new company, what problem am I going to solve to anybody, you know, or to my causality people? Job to be done. So if you know the job to be, you know that's disruption going on, you know the architecture is wrong, you know we need to go for a new architecture, the job to be done is defined, then you know this, you need to know the strategy. And if you know that it's wise to start with emergent and then go with the deliberate strategy, you're already on the safe side. And with the money it's the same thing, you go with the good money instead of the bad money. So you have the ability to experiment and to have the lessons learned. So as a recap, these concepts, these are sub-concepts of a framework, or let's say it's concepts of disruption. And these are concepts hanging together. If you miss at one particular step, you can fail, or one can fail, or just go in a dead end. And what I actually want to bring over here tonight, the value added, is to give to this small and important group of people an idea about what disruption is, what it can mean, and how you can face it and how you can confront it. And obviously, last but not least, we have written actually a white paper, Modular Business Architecture as a Banking Use Case, with two lovely people, David Bundy from PwC in RegTech, doing already now a disruption within regulatories, and German Ramirez, a good friend of mine who is a social media expert. We have participated in various courses at high-class universities in the US. We have read about a lot of academic articles and empirical results, and we put all this together in this white paper. And I guess at the end you will receive this presentation and you're absolutely welcome to have a look at it. It will have a new version, 0.A, because I had, and this is typically normal, when you find some little spots that were not precisely, where you were not precise, I added it. So the most important thing is now the Q&A. Questions and answers. I don't have any answers, but you have loads of questions, I believe. Thomas, do you have any question?
So where do you see this happening right now? It's impacting our, I introduced ourselves earlier,
yes.
Small and medium enterprises, and local in Switzerland. What's actually relevant right now, right today, that you see happening that maybe we don't see because it's for whatever reason?
One thing, does it have to be SME or can it also be
we serve large
whatever?
Right?
Whatever. So I can give you a couple of examples. In legal, we are facing this. I know this because I'm in a movement called Disruption Disciples, where we publish this white paper. And in the regulatory, through the chatbots and all these algorithms, it's disrupted. I mean, do I want to go really to a lawyer for every small question? No, I want to just chat with it. It's the same with universities. They were disrupted because with the online course, I mean, I did like 3 or 4 online courses. It's superb. I've learned more than at university. It's superb. So this is a disruption, and a coming up a disruption is definitely in banking. Banks will be disrupted. And I can also see the consulting industry being disrupted because a consulting company that understands that basic simple questions, I mean, come on, we know all the methods and the methodologies and approaches. If this is intelligently in a database and you can access, let's say example, what should I do? Should I go, I'm a startup, should I go with what strategy? I'm sure that a chatbot can answer today, go with an emergent strategy because of that and that and that. What money should I skate for? Go with the good money, it means like this and this and that. What else? Healthcare is definitely going to be disrupted because of this is the last example. I know we're not almost in time, but we're almost in time. The healthcare industry, the doctors are facing such a pressure from the government and from the in terms of costs. They are worrying about a lot. And last example, if I'm sick, and I ask you this question, I ask it also to me, to this audience, do I really want to travel when it's 30 degrees a day and I'm had a hard work? Do I want to travel from one doctor to the other? No, I don't want to. So the one-stop medical shop solution is also like something that is going to disrupt the medical industry. Yeah.
Gut, so gibt es noch Fragen, Stefan? Dann vielen Dank. Das war ja
Thank you, it has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Und ich muss sagen, ich denke, ein interessantes Thema, das immer wieder mehr und mehr auftauchen wird. Und, wir schicken Stefans Präsentation mit Link.
Mit der Link.
Und das ist auch aufgenommen worden und Stefan ist nachher auch hier und kann ohne Sakko dann diskutieren über ein kaltes Bier, weil ich denke, das hast du verdient. Dankeschön.
Yes.
Nochmals.
And you can reach me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sorry.
I would love to be linked with you all guys, because network society, that's a must. Social selling. It's no marketing anymore, social selling. Okay. Thank you guys, ladies and gentlemen.
The bar is now open.
Yeah.